is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to pre-order upcoming Force of Will sets, ccgprime.com for singles and supplies, cardodoko.com for those rulers in the international market looking for product, the Ruler School Circuit Series, now taking orders on our Q1 2025 Squid.exe circuit kits, and to our guest lecturer members, Vite Ramen and Casey Madden. Class is in session.
Hey there guys, welcome back to another 101 guide from yours truly, Paul Reisman, teaching assistant here at Ruler School TCG. Today we are talking mulligans, and for a very good reason. The Mulligan Rules have changed recently in Force of Will, and so we're going to break down why that's important for you to consider as someone who might be new to this game. Here are some basic setting the table pieces that you're going to want to understand as we go ahead here. This is just here to help you build better Force of Will decks and to have a better time playing at your locals, a GP or Foul Fest, or having any other competitive environment that's to your liking. Be a little bit kinder to you in terms of how you succeed in those. These are just suggestions for deck building for everybody. If you build differently, that's cool. That's totally fine. This is just our philosophy here at Ruler School as to how we actually do that. And these ideas are presented in this guide for the Wanderer format, but not exclusively for the Wanderer format. We are going to be seeing a couple new formats crop up here, including ABC, which, you know, is really starting to get some traction now that we have some new starter decks, as well as the newly announced Paradox format. So be watching our channel and subscribing so you can see more guides allocated around that sort of content. But let's get down to basics. What is a mulligan? So a mulligan is a do-over in golf. If you've never played golf, don't worry about it. They brought the mulligan into TCGs. Magic the Gathering is well known for having a mulligan system, and it's really just there to do over your hand, right? Redraw your entire hand, or do over some of the cards that you don't need in your opening hand. Force of Will is exactly the same. We have a mulligan as well, and this helps you to find the different cards that might be helpful for you in your early game plays. Sometimes, especially in Magic, when you didn't have a land, they wanted a mechanic that allowed you to find that, which was really helpful. In other games, notably Force of Will, you have a mulligan, so you can just start the game with a decent play, which can be really important in terms of establishing your momentum and your consistency overall. So a mulligan was, very important word, was drawing your opening hand, then placing any number of the cards in your hand on the bottom of the deck, and drawing that same number of cards from the top. Notably, this was not a shuffle. And so what you would be doing is saying, all of these cards that are in my hand that I really don't want to have, I'm not likely to see them for the rest of the game because they're all at the bottom of the deck. They're not shuffled in or anything like that. However, since November 22nd of last year, 2024, the Mulligan rules changed. Now they're much more in line with what you would see in other trading card games. So now you draw your opening hand, you select a number of cards to send back to the deck, you then shuffle your deck, and you draw the same number of cards. And while this seems like a really small change, this fundamentally changes the way you construct decks in the game. Why is that? Well, let's do some math. So prior to the changes, your starting hand had a 70% chance of containing a particular card that you wanted to draw. So say that you had a card like Thunder, and you're saying, I want to have a Thunder because if I have Thunder, I can either deal damage to my opponent on turn 1 of the game, or I can get rid of some really powerful 1-drop that they are probably going to be playing on curve. Well, if you drew 5, didn't see a Thunder, and you put all of them to the bottom of the deck and drew 5 more, you had a 70% chance of finding one of your copies of Thunder, assuming that you were running 4 in the deck. However, now that you are adding in the shuffle, your initial 5 cards contain around a 42.7% chance. That's very, very specific. We used a hypergeometric calculation to determine these values, right? You're losing about 30% of your consistency in your deck. The reason is because of the shuffle. Because you're shuffling everything back in, your variables change. All of the cards that you had in your hand that went to the bottom of the deck are now back in play. You might draw them again. That's a real consideration when you're deck building. So really all you can do is count on those initial 5 cards to really get you going in terms of the game. And because of that, you lose about 30% of certainty when it comes down to drawing any number of cards. There are cards in the game that are hurt by this change. So starter cards, when you are thinking about building your decks, these starting play cards are now more important to consider to make up for this loss in consistency. In order to do that, you're not seeing as many cards anymore in your opening turns. So what you're going to have to do is essentially say, hey, I just need to play more copies of the cards I want to see, right? So with 8 or more starters, I usually like to give it a range of 8 to 10 starters. You're buying some of that consistency back, and now you're at the point where you're nearly around 70% once again if you mulligan your entire hand. So basically you just got to change where the math is being done in order to balance out that equation. Now strategies have to develop alternative starting play lines that help them to approach their win condition in a way that is a little bit more consistent. If you want 10 starters in your deck for your opening hand to find, you're going to be closing in closer to 80%. So there's going to be about 20% of games where you're not going to see that opening play line, and that's something you might want to adjust. And at some point, there's going to be diminishing returns with that. So I would highly suggest you use a hypergeometric calculator when considering how you are approaching your game plan overall. Start at the game effects, such as any of your homeland effects from Hero Cluster, Broken Mask of the Crusader, very much hated card in the format right now. Things like that, things that get cheated into play from your hand because you drew them. Other things like Solaria's Light or Fire or Water, cards like that, they're less reliable now. So if you play a full 4 copies of those cards and you do not see one of them in your opening hand, which is going to happen 60% of the time, those cards may be dead or not useful. So the cards have to be reevaluated in order to see if they have any value in the deck. Broken Mask of the Crusader, at least from where I'm sitting as the teacher's assistant here, is Broken Mask is probably not going to be as in many decks as it was before. Maybe now only in Glorious decks, which is what I would arguably say the intention of the card was meant to shore up that deck as we go into a new Masterpiece collection where Lapis Cluster is the focus, and Glorious came out in that cluster, and they wanted to give Glorious some new tools. Things like revealing from outside the game effects are the next thing you need to consider. Things like Rogue Spectator, Replicant Shiva, Fire Pit Trap. These are now more consistent because these are cards that you are going to see more often, most often, because they don't affect your deck construction at all. Basically, if you can play them, you might as well put them in your sideboard, and there they are. These cards can be really useful for that. To kind of give you a sense of what decks could potentially look like before and after these mulligan changes, I pulled up one of my old decks that I put on the channel. This is my Mi Sung list, and this is an interesting list because it has one of those cards that if it starts in your hand, it can be cheated into the field. That's Solaria's Light. That's the top right set of 4 cards there. They can be cheated in. I had about a 70% chance of saying, hey, let me look at the top 5. Oh, there's not a copy there. I'm going to ship all of those to the bottom. I'm going to look at the next 5. Oh, wow. That's a pretty strong, consistent, pretty good chance that I'm going to see a Solaria's Light in my opening hand to then be cheated into the field, right? So this was my natural play line. I would play my initial Ohm and then have a Solaria's Light, which I could then use to fuel one of my win conditions, which was Odin, Replicant Odin, way down at the bottom of this list. And then I had some other 1-drops in here that were, you know, maybe going to be helpful if I needed something a little bit later in the game to initiate some other things. However, now, if I were playing this list that's very similar to this now, I'd be playing something closer to this. I'd be playing something similar to playing Flute and maybe some Dark Alices in order to get me into cards that are going to help me in my win condition. What's also really helpful is now my offensive and defensive plays are much more varied, right? So I have the Light Curtain play that I could use, banishing some cards from my hand, removing from the game some of the cards in my hand in order to fuel a Replicant Odin later in the game. I also have Liberation of the Light that can help me do that same thing. But you notice that I pulled back pretty significantly in terms of my opening plays being Solaria's Light or something similar, mostly because there are a few things I can count on. First of all, Mi-Sung has that initial opening effect that allows me to play initial one of his Ohms, getting me one of my Elders, which allows me to then say, hey, I'm just going to call Stone and pass and just call it from there. If I end up getting a Flute in my opening hand as well, that's going to be really helpful because now I have ways to play cards on my opponent's turn and I'm ramping ahead a little bit. But it's not so heavily invested in turn one as a mid-range deck. So the deck, in my opinion, needed to go in that direction because Solaria's Light wasn't nearly as reliable. However, if I wanted to put it back in, I might want to try something a little bit different so my opening plays feel a little bit more consistent. So in conclusion, mulligans and deck construction are more important than ever to consider. Without a game plan on turn one, some decks simply just fall apart, and knowing where to go to pivot from one play line to the next is important to have in mind and map out as you are deck building, understanding what cards do what in your deck list and when you want to employ them. So if we go back to my initial list here, where I took out the Solaria's Light and put in Flutes instead, Flute isn't nearly as important on turn one, but it's there to give me a little bit of an edge. Otherwise, I have some defensive plays and I have other ways of just drawing myself additional cards. That's kind of what my game plan is for this version of the deck. All of that being said, mulligans have changed the game. It's changed the way that we look at the game of Force of Will and how we take things on. And you might have some questions about that. If you do, let us know down in the comments section down below. Especially guides like this are really helpful for me to hear what you all are in terms of deck construction, topic of the video, kind of like what you are all thinking about when you listen to this sort of stuff. So let me know what you think down in the comment section down below. Do you agree or disagree? Are there ways in which you're looking at decks that I didn't cover? Now that mulligans have changed, let me know down there. While you're down there, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more content like this and ring that bell so you get all of these videos as soon as they hit your inbox. Leave us a like, and until next time guys, this has been Paul with Ruler School saying class is dismissed.